work together at PPLA?
We did.
Okay, and for how long did you work together at PPLA?
Dr. Nucatola was a resident at USC, which is across the street from our downtown Bixby facility, and then she was a fellow in the reproductive fellowship program, so she worked with us then. And then she continued as an independent contractor for us while she was simultaneously the medical director for Planned Parenthood in Santa Barbara. And so our relationship continued.
And would you consider her a friend?
I would.
Okay. Who made the decision, or was there a, when fetal tissue began at Planned Parenthood Los Angeles, how did that occur?
Objection. Vague, calls for narrative.
I was approached by representatives of Novogenics. I had been involved, as we discussed, in tissue programs before. In the past, when I had been approached by tissue procurement programs, I was told that the board at PPLA would not be receptive to this. When Novogenics approached me, I thought it's time to educate the board about what the good things are that can come from tissue donation programs. So Novogenics presented a proposal, and we invited them to come in with a PowerPoint presentation to share with the staff. Because if the staff who's obtaining consent are engaged in the process and informed in the process, they'll be better able to answer patient questions. I cannot remember, but I also think that we presented this at a board meeting, but I can't be sure. After that, we got permission from the administration at PPLA to proceed with this program. We had the contract looked at by the legal team. I obtained a waiver from PPFA to start this program, and that's how we started.
Okay. And let's see. So so you've testified Novogenics approached you. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Right. And why did Novogenics approach you in particular, if you know?
I was going to say it calls for speculation, but
I think I recall that at that time they were associated with UCLA, and that several of our providers were also associated with UCLA, and it's possible that one of our providers sent them in my direction, but I can't remember the details.
Okay. And then was there a contract with Novogenics?
There was.
Yes. And then who negotiated the contract from the PPLA side?
objection lacks foundation.
Was there a contract negotiation?
Yes.
Okay. And then was an individual at PPLA a part of the contract negotiation?
Yes.
And who or whom were the individuals at PPLA who were part of the contract negotiations?
I represented PPLA and discussed with the Novogenics team how their process was going to work, indemnification, who would be at the clinic, and other details of the contract. I took that negotiation to our management team, and they signed off on it. Novogenics took that contract to their, I think they had a board of directors, and they signed off on it. We involved the board, as I mentioned, and the person who signed off on contracts in our department then signed off on it, and then we started the process.
And then, was Novogenics a not-for-profit or a for-profit?
I believe it was a for-profit.
For-profit, okay. And then you had mentioned that, I believe you'd said other tissue procurement organizations had approached you prior to the Novogenics approach. Do you recall how many tissue procurement agencies had approached you before Novogenics?
2 or 3, perhaps, in the time that I was at LA, and then maybe 1 or 2 when I was at Yale. Not an awful lot.
Sure. And so other than the Yale, New Haven tissue procurement and the PPLA tissue procurement, have you personally participated in any other tissue procurement projects? Maybe the right word? Programs?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then once the Novogenics program, so the Novogenics contract you negotiated, then when did the actual tissue procurement begin with Novogenics?
I think it was sometime in 2011, maybe.
Okay. And then was it continuing when you left PPLA?
It was.
Okay. And then what I want to do is I'd like to put the contract with Novogenics in front of you, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's we've marked it as pre-marked it as Exhibit 2502.
So at this point, I'm going to ask that this portion of the deposition be designated attorney's eyes only.
Amy, can I just ask for clarification about what you mean when you say this portion? When will we know that that portion is over?
Well, I'm happy to state that if I remember to do so, and at a point where I feel like we're not talking about anything that's appropriate for attorney's eyes only.
That's fine. I just,
Yeah.
because you did that another deposition, I thought, I didn't know when it would end. Okay.
Ideally, I think to say it stops, and I welcome you asking me.
Okay.
And I'll just ask first if you recognize, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Okay, and what is it?
This is the specimen donation agreement between PPLA and Novogenics.
Okay. And so I did want to just loop back. When you had said there was a waiver. Do you recall who at Planned Parenthood, or you had said you'd applied for a waiver with Planned Parenthood Federation of America. To whom did PPLA make that application?
I cannot now remember. It was someone, who did we apply to for waivers? I really can't remember.
Okay, and do you recall which department?
Well, that's what I was just trying to think
Sure,
of.
sure.
Counsel, before you ask another question, can I just ask what this Bates number is and what the party is that produced this document? Because it's not ours.
I believe this was from Novogenics, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. It says
Is that what
CLM.
CLM means? Copy.
I did not manage that part of the production.
Fair enough.
So, okay. And so you were looking at the department or division within PPFA that waivers would have been applied from.
Correct.
Right. So, do you recall? Did you have any interaction? Did you have any interactions as part of the waiver application with PPFA staff?
Objection vague.
Are you asking about this one or in general?
Right, about the so
Yeah.
so when you were looking for when you sought the waiver from PPFA, I guess why don't we ask more basically, how did you make application for a waiver from PPFA?
There was a form to fill out, and I have applied for a number of waivers through the years, and some of them are relatively pro forma, and they say, yes, you can do it. Others, I have never had one rejected, but there are other affiliates who I know applied for something that was outside the bounds of what PPFA was comfortable with, so they were rejected with discussion. This one, I don't really, stop, okay.
Asked you, how did you get
no,
the waiver?
No, just
Okay.
But I'm asking, how did you make that application for the waiver?
I made it on the waiver application form.
Okay. And then, was there a discussion about the waiver application from PPFA?
Possibly, but I cannot remember.
Okay. Do you remember who, did you discuss the waiver with anyone at PPFA?
Objection asked and answered.
Possibly, but I don't remember.
Okay. And then do you recall who awarded the waiver? What individual at PPFA maybe would have made the decision on the waiver?
No.
Okay. You had said Novogenics made a presentation to PPLA. Did they come in and do the presentation once, or did they do it on a more regular basis?
As I recall, they did it once to the staff and once to the board.
But and then did they leave a copy of the presentation for PPLA staff?
Yes.
Okay. And then would staff or board, well, would staff who had not seen the presentation be provided the copy of the presentation?
Objection lacks foundation, if you know.
I suspect the answer is no, because the existing staff would have taught the incoming staff without the aid of the presentation.
Okay. And so was there when new staff would start, when new staff would start, was there some instruction on the Novogenics fetal tissue procurement program?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the nature of that instruction?
Most of the incoming, we call them RHAs, Research Health Associates, had instruction in a wide variety of what their responsibilities were. I do not believe that they received written information like this about Novogenics. I believe that the person who was teaching them about the clinical responsibilities would have said, on days that we're doing abortion, we're involved in tissue donation, here's what the consent form is for the patient, here's why we want to do it, and it was a verbal rather than anything written.
Okay. And, all right, so then let's go back to the contract then.